We're going to continue our statistics lesson with histograms. A histogram is a graphical display of data using bars of different heights. It is similar to a bar graph, but a histogram groups numbers into ranges. And then there are no gaps between the bars in the histogram. So this is going to look just like a bar graph, except the bars are going to be smushed together instead of having spaces. Okay, pause this slide. Alright, to make a histogram, you're going to decide what intervals you want to use for your set of numbers. So you're going to decide what numbers you want to put on each bar on the histogram. And your intervals need to be the same. So depending on your data, you can go by ones, fives, tens, hundreds. It depends on what your list of numbers look like. But once you pick an interval, it needs to be the same interval for every bar. Then you're going to make a frequency table, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. Then you're going to label your x-axis as your intervals and your y-axis as the frequency of your data. So you're going to pick intervals and then see how many numbers lie in each interval. Then you're going to graph that. Okay, so go ahead and pause this so you can fill in your blanks. Alright, so this is an example of how to make a histogram. The number of words that students in a typing class can type in a minute are listed below. Make a frequency table of the data, then make a histogram. So you need to pick intervals here. It doesn't really matter what intervals you pick, but for this particular example, I'm going to go by fives. So I'm going to pick an interval that's 16 to 20. So any number that falls between 16 and 20, I'm going to tally in this row. Alright, then 21 to 25, which also has 5 numbers in it. 26 to 30, 31 to 35, and 36 to 40. Again, you don't have to go by fives, but for this particular set of data, it seems to be a good chunk to go by. So now I'm just going to start tallying them up. So 25 fits in this range. 19 fits in the first interval. 23 fits in the second interval. 29 fits in the third interval. 34 fits in the fourth interval. 26 is in the third. 30 is also in the third. 40 is in the last one. 33 is in the fourth one. 20 would go in the first one. 35 would go in the fourth one. 35 would also go in the fourth one. 25 would go in the second one. 29 would go in the third one. 36 would go in the last one. 22 would go in the second one. And 31 would go in the fourth one. Okay? So this was the interval that I picked. I decided to go by 5, so 16 to 20, 21 through 25. Then I tallied up all the numbers that fit in that interval. Now I'm basically, for the frequency, going to count my tally so I can make it, so it makes it easier to make my histogram. So there's 2 tallies here, 4, 4, 5, and 2. So these are the numbers that I'm going to use to make my histogram. To make a histogram, you're going to use a coordinate plane. This is an XY axis, this being your x-axis, and this being your y-axis. Your x-axis is going to have your intervals on it. So my intervals were 16 to 20 was my first interval, and then I had 21 through 25, then 26 through 30, 31 through 35, and 36 through 40. Okay? So across the bottom there, my interval represented the number of words per minute. Okay. Then on my y-axis, I'm going to put my frequency or my tallies here. Okay, so I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think is enough. Okay, and this represents your number of students. Okay. Alright, and then you just draw bars that go with the numbers from your table. So for 16 through 20, for that interval, there were 2 students in that interval. So I'm going to draw a bar up to the 2 and fill it in. Alright, for 21 through 25, there were 4 students. So I'm going to make that bar all the way up to the 4. And they're going to be touching. There's no gaps like a bar graph. In a histogram, they touch. In a bar graph, these numbers down here at the bottom aren't in intervals. It would literally be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay? Every number would have to be represented. And then you leave spaces. In a histogram, we put our numbers together in intervals, and then we put our bars together where there's no gap. Alright, so for 26 through 26 through 30, we also have 4. So that would be the same size bar, again, touching. 31 through 35, there was 5 kids that did that. So make your bar up to 5. Make sure they're touching. And then 36 to 40, there were 2 kids. And that would be my histogram. Okay, looks very similar to a bar graph. Okay, the only difference is we use intervals down here and our bars touch with no spaces.